Okay, all yours.
Okay, first of all, thank you all for coming tonight. And I owe my gratitude to Ken for inviting me to share with you some of my thoughts about mental causation and its probabilistic nature. I hope you'll have some understanding for my not so good English. It's a bit rusty in the last couple of years. I didn't have much opportunity to use it in a spoken language. So just let me. The problem of mental causation is certainly one of the most important problems, the central problems of Western philosophy since the times of Descartes in 17th century. The very notion of mental causation is a concept, it is a probably central concept in our conceiving ourselves as conscious beings, as agents, as beings of free will. So if we aim to defend a position that we are beings of free will, that we are agents, I believe that we have to try and provide an answer not only qualitative, but also some kind of a more detailed answer concerning the very mechanism of mental causation, which is not an easy task. In fact, it's one of the most complicated tasks in science and philosophy today. My personal motivation for engaging in this problem is okay, Marcus, is your hand?
Marcus, you're muted.
Marcus can't hear me, I think.
Marcus, you're muted.
Mute, Marcus.
Yeah, would you rather people wait until the end before making comments, or are you okay with people making comments while you interrupt?
Yes, of course. That
It's
was
fine
the idea.
either way with me. I just have something I'd like to say, but I can wait.
Kenneth.
Well, go ahead now.
Okay.
Hello?
So,
Marcus, what did you want to say?
Hello?
Yeah, what did you want to say?
yes.
Yeah, I was just wondering, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. No, I was just wondering, I mean, you're saying this all started with Descartes in the 17th century. What exactly did Descartes notice that nobody had noticed before?
Well, I was just starting. So what I meant was...
I can't hear you, sorry.
Can you hear me now?
Hello?
We can all hear you. So Marcus, there
I can't
might be
hear what
something.
you're saying. I can't hear what anyone's saying, actually. Sorry.
Well, I believe it's best if I keep talking. So I think I can answer some of the questions during my my talk, and
Hello?
some of them later during the discussion after it. So what I meant to say that the problem of mental causation has been a problem waiting for a solution since the question that Bohemian Princess Elizabeth posed to Descartes, her mentor. She asked him to explain to her the causal relationship between those substances within his doctrine of substantial dualism, res cogitans and res extensa. And of course, Descartes didn't have a good answer to that question. He posed some processes inside the pineal gland, but his explanation was not very good. My personal motivation for the investigation of mental causation consists in two main questions, two principal questions, I believe. How does the mind interact with the physical world? However, you see the mind as a soul or as a set of mental properties, as in property dualism or in some other way. And the second question is how to distinguish the manifestations of physical and mental causation. Because last Monday we saw that we have a great problem to if even we observe an act of mental causation, I am not sure we would be able to distinguish it from the simple act of physical causation, and that's the main problem in this in the explanation of causation. And one more important note is that the ontological orientation of researchers in especially in fields of physics and natural sciences, and also in philosophy, depends on their attitude towards the issue of mental causation. Our worldviews are pretty much metaphysically laden, so to speak. Our interpretations of scientific results, our planning of our research, our views of the complete scientific process that we are going through day after day is dependent in a way on our ontological orientation. So it is very important to give at least a provisional answer to ourselves. What is our conviction concerning mental causation? And the second question is, what is the conviction of mental causation of the scientific community as a whole? So the prevailing ontological doctrine among the researchers in physics, at least in physics, and I believe in other natural sciences in the last, I believe, half a century or a century, has been physicalism, of course. This is a metaphysical thesis which claims that the world contains nothing beyond physical properties and events. So there is nothing over and above physical in the world, according to physicalists. And the main reason for this popularity of physicalism among researchers is twofold, I believe. The first reason is the indubitable, as Sherlock would say, success of physical science and the ensuing technology. The whole Western civilization is, in a way, the product of our successes in physics and the ensuing technologies. So this success have led us to believe, have led many of the researchers to believe that there is some kind of hegemony of physics over other sciences, as Papinot put it. Which means that all phenomena in the universe can ultimately be reduced to manifestation of the action of purely physical laws. The second, and I believe the most important reason, really, is that mental properties are unobservable. So in the process of explaining mental causation, we always have to deal with something which is unobservable. To explain mental causation, to explain the interaction between the physical and the mental, is a problem which is similar to explaining if God, to giving a question if God exists or not. We're dealing with an unobservable. So there is, and there always will be some kind of faith included in our convictions about mental causation. With our senses, with our physical instruments, we can only directly observe physical effects, bodily movements and sensations, etc. Our measuring instruments are calibrated, are constructed by observing physical laws. They're calibrated only for measuring physical properties of things. They're not calibrated, they're not made for observing mental properties. And there is a great statement by Averill and Keating given back in 1981 that there is no way to specify the state of a non-physical thing through physical variables, which means that if we're talking about our mind, our soul, our set of mental parameters, mental properties, there is no way that this set consists physical properties. So you can't ascribe energy or charge or momentum or any other physical property to any mental thing. However do you define that mental thing? And that's the main problem with mental causation. The mainstay of the metaphysical doctrine of physicalism is certainly the principle of causal closure of the physical, which claims that every physical effect that has a cause, not every physical effect must have a cause, but every physical effect that has a cause has a sufficient physical cause, which means that by following the causal chain, the chain of events from any physical event back through time, we never have to leave the physical domain. Every link in that chain has to be physical. And that's the mainstay of physicalism. If mental events are causally efficient, and I believe most of us will agree that mental events are causally efficient, because if I make a decision to raise my hand, I will raise my hand. That's a kind of a causal efficiency of the mental. So the mental properties are not epiphenomenal, as some people claim. And if there is no systematic overdetermination, So if we exclude the possibility that systematically every event is caused simultaneously by some physical and some mental event, then we have to conclude, according to this principle, this argument, that mental events that have a cause are identical to physical events. So we stumble upon type physicalism, or if we lower our strictness a bit, some kind of supervenience or other physicalism, but we are always inside the boundaries of physicalism if we think that way. As of course, as effect, by effect I mean the effect in Kimian sense, as an instance of a property or on an entity at a given point in time. The inductive support, the empirical support for the argument is twofold. Papineau distinguished two main causes for the belief in causal closure of the physical and in physicalism itself. The first argument is his argument from fundamental forces. He claims that since all physical forces can be reduced to a small number of fundamental conservative forces, then it is likely that mental forces can be reduced in the same way. So it's inference according to analogy, which makes this argument not so strict. But the second one is very important. The second argument, I believe, is a very firm argument. It's an argument from physiology. It claims that since we have 2 centuries of physiological research behind us, and physiological research conducted over these 2 past centuries did not indicate the presence of any special or non-physical forces. And therefore, he concludes that non-physical forces probably do not exist. It's a pretty straightforward argument. These arguments can be rephrased in the language of the energy formalism as the couple of claims that you have on the bottom of the slide. Every isolated physical system is conservative, and non-physical forms of energy probably do not exist. So the guiding idea is that mental forces, if they exist, would always violate the law of conservation of energy. And when I talked with my colleagues and with some researchers, with some proponents of this physicalist view, they always kept that argument, the argument of the violation of the conservation laws, as the fundament of their beliefs. Is there another way of looking at things? I believe there is. You probably noticed that these arguments they implicitly imply that mental action is reducible to classical conservative Newtonian forces, forces which cause acceleration of some constituents of the system. And these Newtonian forces are nomologically equivalent to physical forces. They are manifested by causing accelerations in the brain, in nervous systems. So there's a hidden premise in all these arguments, which ensures that in advance, that only physical states are causally efficient. So it's clearly begging the question in favor of physicalism. And just like the physical, this hidden premise claims that mental events can affect the physical system in 2 ways: by changing energy, momentum, and other conserved quantities inside the system, and by redistributing those quantities in the system. And this redistribution also cannot be accomplished without adding energy and momentum. So it means you cannot change anything within the physical system without acting with a physical Newtonian force. But if we claim that mental entities cannot have even one physical attribute, cannot have even one physical property, as we saw earlier, then how does something that does not have physical properties act on physical systems with a force, with a property which is clearly completely physical, nomologically and metaphysically physical? So a dualist need not accept this premise, because why should any material mind obey the laws of physics in this way if it cannot be described by physical attributes? Is there an alternative? The only other option, as I see it, open to an interactionist that does not involve a violation of the laws of conservation of energy and other conservation laws, is the following claim: that mental causation manifests itself through directed, intentional redistribution of conserved quantities, such as energy, momentum, etc., without doing work, hence without the action of a Newtonian type force, and thus without causing anomalous accelerations in the system. But the price that has to be paid for such a model, such a conviction, is the local violation of the second law of thermodynamics. Now, if you mention the violation of the second law of thermodynamics to any physicist, you know that the reaction will not be very good, because it opens the way to the construction of perpetuum mobile of the second kind. So it's not a popular view. But I don't know if we remember the way that the second law of thermodynamics was introduced in physics. We know that it was introduced as a statistical law, the law of statistical nature. Maxwell himself firmly believed that conviction, which has its meaning only in the physical systems with great number of molecules, with massive material physical systems. So the very application of the second law of thermodynamics was always followed by some questions of interpretation. Is this violation of the second law of thermodynamics as a fundamental physical law even conceivable? Is there a precedent in the history of physics? Well, it turns out that the precedent is here for almost a century and a half. And the author of this precedent is Maxwell himself, with his thought experiment of Maxwell's demon. It turns out that the mind, a mind that functions in the proposed way, would be an almost literal embodiment of Maxwell's demon. In this illustration, we see the experiment of the thought experiment of Maxwell's demon on panels A and B. There's a container filled with gas. The gas consists of faster and slower molecules. The faster ones are the gray ones here. There's a wall between the two chambers A and B, in the container, and there's a door in the wall controlled by a being called demon. In fact, Lord Kelvin called it a demon a few years after the original experiment. The demon controls the door according to the criterion of the molecular speed. The faster molecules can pass from B to A, and the slower molecules can only pass from A to B. So after some times, we have the picture, the situation in the physical system shown in panel B, where we can clearly see that the second law of thermodynamics is violated by the action of the demon without doing work on the physical system, on the gas itself, because we have a hotter gas on the left side and the colder gas on the right side. So we have a physical system that is ready to perform some work. And this is the major question. So we have behind us a century and a half of persistent attempts of a large number of physicists, top-class physicists, who try to exercise the demon from physics. And their attempts are sometimes more, sometimes less imaginative. But in a couple of papers published in 1998 and 1999, Ehrman and Norton powerfully demonstrated that all such attempts to exercise the demon assume that the demon, and thus the demon gas system, the generalized, the wider physical system, is already a thermodynamical system. So the second law of thermodynamics is by definition applied to such a system. You don't need to exercise the demon, because the second law is preserved by definition. It's our presupposition that we have a thermodynamic system which obeys the second law of thermodynamics. If the demon, however, acts as an agent outside the system, then exorcism is not possible. So if our agent if our demon is, for example, a mind, an immaterial mind, as dualists believe that it is, then you can't save the second law of thermodynamics if the actions of a demon, if mental causation is manifested in the way analogous to the way we have here with Maxwell's demon. So let's generalize this thought experiment, Maxwell's thought experiment. Let's assume that this is not a container of gas, but some larger physical systems with two states, states A and state B. And those circles are constituents, some constituents of that system. They may be ions or molecules or neurons or ion channels or any other part of our nervous system. The wall with the door in the wall symbolizes the boundary conditions in the system. And the demon, the immaterial demon, is our mind. So if the mind can, for example, open and close the doors without performing work, without acting with some force on the constituents of the system, it only changes boundary conditions. It changes nothing in the physical properties of the system itself. It changes boundary conditions inside the system. And if the demon, if the mind is able to cause the situation on panel B, the violation of the second law of thermodynamics, and if it can lead to some ordered state of the system, then we have an outside view on the mechanism of mental causation, which would escape the violation of the first law of thermodynamics, violation of the law of conservation of energy. The panel C shows us the situation as seen by the outside observer, which is not able to distinguish between the constituents of the system which have some parameter x. So these constituents colored in gray in this generalized experiment would be constituents of the system possessing some quantity, some parameter, observable to the demon, but not observable to an outside observer. So for the outside observer, the system would be homogeneous. There would be no gradients of any quantity, no physical forces, no disposition towards some action whatsoever. The demon would know by observing the situation on panel B that there are gradients of some quantities inside the system. So the system would be able to perform some action, or at least theoretically. So this is the generalization of Maxwell's demon and the basic idea behind an alternative version of the explanation of mental causation explained by an interactionist. So the actions of the mind, which are always directed and intentional, at least the actions of our minds, imply that there are nomological relations between physical and mental parameters, some laws governing the process that I just described. These laws are the expressions, let's call them psychophysical laws, as David Chalmers did in his papers, influential papers and books during the 90s and in the beginning of this century. So these psychophysical laws connect the physical and mental domains of reality. By getting to know these psychophysical laws, we would be able to give a clearer and more detailed description of this process. And since mental causation manifests itself not in anomalous, non-physical accelerations, but in anomalous correlations, as we can see in the panel B, we have an action which results in a correlation of initially uncorrelated physical effects. So if mental causation manifests itself in anomalous correlations of neural events, then these laws are prima facie probabilistic in nature. So individual events are caused by the action of ordinary physical forces, which arise as the result of gradients in the physical system, but the initial part of the process is described by these anomalous correlations. In this way, we can construct a conceivable and possible interactionist account of mental causation, we have to start with the assumption, which is basic and commonplace for all the dualists, that the state of a psychophysical system is determined not only by physical, but also by some mental state parameters. So the state of the system is defined by two sets of parameters, Q and M, physical and mental. Then if that is so, we can imagine an extended psychophysical phase space on the system, and then apply the means of statistical physics to describe the state of the system and its dynamical evolution. And mental causation in this picture is instantiated as the disposition of mental properties to change the state probability distribution in the nervous system of living beings, and thus lead to the redistribution of conserved quantities such as energy, momentum, etc., and other conserved quantities without altering their total quantity, their total amount in the system. This redistribution of the state probability of the system can be a consequence, as I see things, of three conceivable reasons. The first, the increase of the statistical weight of the level due to the introduction of mental variables. Every next variable that you add to the system changes the number of microstates, which consists of macrostate of the system. The second effect is changing the a priori probability of microstates through the mentioned psychophysical laws, which control the a priori probability of the state. And the third way that this can be accomplished is the control of boundary conditions in the system. We saw that the experiment of Maxwell's demon has shown us the analogy of that. I can't see the fourth way. Maybe there is a fourth way, that an immaterial thing can change the state of the system. An external observer would perceive only anomalous correlations of neural events, while the effective causes are, of course, physical. They have to be physical. So current physics would be in a position of the observer in the panel C. It is the current physics would be blind in this picture to mental causation. We wouldn't be able to perceive mental causation or any of the steps in this algorithm with the means of physics, with our senses or with our physical instruments. We have some researchers who claimed that there are effects as described. For example, Lowy talked about the seemingly random neurological events which correlate with a specific physical event. He talked about the inverted causal trees, about a number of neural events which mysteriously lead to one physical effect, such as raising my hand. The study of anomalous correlation of neural events in that way is within the scope of neurophysiological research, but this research has to be directed towards searching for anomalous correlations and not anomalous accelerations. This is my firm belief, and of course supported by the apparatus of statistical analysis. So the probability, there are of course some physical analogies and their upshots. I won't take your time I will not enter into some details of this, but the probability distribution function of the state system, the function of physical and mental parameters both, represents a measure, of course, it's obviously a measure of disposition of the system to evolve in a certain way. And that's pretty similar to this, to the role of the state function of the microphysical system, psi function in quantum mechanics. And this analogy leads us to the conclusion that perhaps there is some kind of causal homogeneity in nature. Perhaps there is some common ground between physical causation, which is well known to us from physics, and mental causation, which will be well known to us only after we formulate the psychophysical laws I talked about. the probability of the state now is a common ground between physical and mental events. There is an interesting physical analogy, an interesting account of mental causation formulated by Papineau, who views causation as a macroscopic probabilistic phenomenon. The only difference between his model and this account I talked about tonight is in the nature of selectional states corresponding to mental states. With Papineau, these selectional states are ontogenetic, are the products of ontogenetic and phylogenetic evolution of conscious beings. While in this account, the bearer of these selection states is an immaterial mind which makes some choices and which shows the examples of free will. So once you overcome the pain of violating Occam's razor and introducing some extra elements in the model, such as unobserved mental parameters, the model becomes pretty simple. It is simpler than the corresponding physicalist models. It is a little bit unorthodox, of course, but of course, in the search for truth, it is very important to keep an open mind. Thank you.
Well, thank you. We'll take questions now, but first,